Not as crunchy as I thought. They kind of just like disintegrate.
Now, I like to take them and put them in the air fryer, just for like 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
Just gives them that little crisp on the outside.
Live ones or those that you gave
I
me?
get them live sometime.
Yeah. You ever get like the big?
No, they're too expensive. Yeah, they can run, you know, $15, $16 a pound.
Do you care if we pass these out?
Oh, absolutely not.
Try and be really.
Okay. As mentioned by a lady on the back row, we've been learning about bugs, and now we're going to learn how to kill them. This is our talk about IPM, Integrated Pest Management. And we're going to see how we can add some routines into our normal work in our garden to help us not only be better stewards of the vegetables that we're growing, but will also make you more aware of the kinds of things that could be harming what you're growing. Integrated pest management. Some of the things that you need to know in order to create an action plan. You need to have knowledge about the pest and what control strategies. Me, I'm one of those people who walk around with a shop vac and a spray bottle with dish soap in it. That's my routine every time I go outside. I'm sucking up bugs in the shop vac that I can't wash off. I've got my phone there so I can take a picture of any bugs that I can see. So that's how we get started. Integrated pest management does not mean that you are trying to get to the goal of having 0 pests. That's impossible. You can't kill everything in your yard. But you can mitigate some of the damage by multiple control strategies. And I think that's why this program is interesting. They have basically 4 parts. You have the prevention part, where you're trying to see what's coming into your garden and mitigate it quickly. Monitoring it on a regular basis to check and see what's happening to your fruits and vegetables. An assessment once you have found out what's there. And then an action plan. Am I going to go to full pesticides? Am I going to do something a little softer with some different kinds of organic sprays? And again, that all depends on what your goal is. If you want to have an organic garden, you're going to have to use all kinds of organic chemicals to help you with your pests. Just because it's organic, though, does not mean you can necessarily put it on your plants and eat the vegetables or fruit that come off of it. So make sure you're carefully reading those labels before you buy anything. If you have any questions about what you may want to purchase, go to the Texas A&M site. Look up Master Gardeners, and they will be able to guide you to a list of different things that you can do to amend your soil, that you can use as chemical pesticides, natural pesticides, and then different kinds of tools that you can use to help you eradicate the pests without using any chemicals whatsoever. Economic injury level. One of the things that you need to think about when you're doing your garden is, what am I willing to sacrifice? There are some people, and I've known lots of them, who will go out in the spring and they will throw seeds in the ground, they'll cover them up, they look to the sky to give them rain when they can. They go down the rows every once in a while to take down some of the tall weeds, but other than that, that's all they do. When you have a garden like that, you're not mitigating your insects. So what you're doing is you're feeding a lot of things in your yard that isn't necessarily what you want to do with what you've grown. A lot of us, especially people who are vegetarians and organic vegetarians to boot, we can't use those pesticides in our food. So we have to learn mitigating techniques in order to make something that we're going to be able to enjoy and consume. So it all depends. If I plant 5 squash plants, am I willing to sacrifice 2 of the 5 to pests while leaving 3 to hopefully produce. So you're mitigating what your risk factors are. Me, my risk factors are high because I depend on my garden and my hydroponic units in the house to basically provide me with all the tomatoes, lettuce, spinach, celery that I eat throughout the year. And I eat a lot of it. So I have to be real careful, especially in the hydroponics area, because under a 24-hour period, you can lose everything. So for some of us, it's more important than for others. I've known a lot of people who were hobby gardeners, and they didn't care what the fruit did. They just went out and made a pretty garden. That's fine. I've seen beautiful butterfly gardens like that. I have a small butterfly garden in my yard, but the majority is for food. So my risks may not be the same risks that other people have, and that's something that you can only determine personally. Well, what is a pest?
Anything that you don't want.
Well, you know,
Pest or a weed.
Mac is a pest. Sorry, Mac.
in my neighborhood, I've got a couple of kids in the neighborhood that their parents frequently on Facebook in our neighborhood page will call their kids a pest. I guess.
When you get them like that on that tree, what are they doing? Just hanging?
Those,
Yeah.
yep, they're just hanging
The
out.
homeboys?
Yep, and they eat the bugs and stuff that live in the cracks of the tree, in the bark.
Wow.
So they're having a big dinner. They like fungus.
They're not killing the tree, are they?
No. All they're doing is eating the fungus and all kind of creepy things that are living in these cracks in the bark. So what is a pest? What is an insect? Where is the insect? And what is the insect doing? Those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves when we go out into our garden and we find something that we don't want there. Or we find something that wasn't there yesterday and you're not sure whether you want it there or not. That's where I am most of the time. Do I kill this one or do I keep it? Well, what is a pest? Again, you're going to look at the pests that you find in your garden with some of the tools we've already used, a hand lens, collecting equipment. I use a pair of tweezers. I never go bug hunting without gloves. Turn leaves over and inspect the base of the plant right where the plant is coming out of the soil, because that's a particular area that lots of bugs like to congregate. So under the leaves and around the base of the plant. Those are the two key places that you want to look at your plants every time you go out and inspect them. Sometimes you will see some of the insects laying their eggs closer to the stem of the plant, and sometimes some of them will actually get on the plant stem themselves. But it all starts on that leaf because that's where they want to be. They're trying to hide. Inspecting properly. Most people that I know are distance admirers. There's a lady in my neighborhood who has spent, I don't know how much money on her yard. She had landscaping people in there for a good month. When she first planted it, it looked like a jungle paradise. I think now she has one thing that's still living. And I know she paid good money because, I mean, she even bought the aluminum rings to go around them, you know, like raised beds. I mean, she really went all out. But the only one plant's still surviving, and that's a cedar elm that she just planted. The only thing that's living. All of her succulents are dead. All of her tropicals are dead. They're just not there. A lot of them because they didn't belong here. They were in the wrong climate. But the box stores will sell you anything you want to buy. Just because it's at the box store doesn't mean that it's going to thrive here.
Right.
So this is the distant admirer. Isn't the garden beautiful? Look at all the colors. Look at the beautiful trees and what the landscape does. She's layered the landscape so you see the small ones in the front and it gets bigger as you go back. It's a beautiful design. But that's what you do when you need to look at bugs.
What are some of those bugs in the thing?
Aphids.
It looks like a lot of stuff going on.
There is, but the majority of it's aphids.
Like eggs, is that what they are too?
So you want to be an up-close inspector. So what you're going to be looking for is where you find the pest, how many of them you actually found. Because seeing one or two is not earth-shattering. Going out and seeing your entire underleaf of one of your plants covered with eggs, that's a different story. It's conducive to conditions. We have a very short, very intensely cold winter here compared to other states. That period of time is not long enough to kill most any bugs. You really need to have a deep freeze over several days. So a lot of our bugs are burrowing in the ground and they're living through the cold periods and they're coming out when it gets warm, and they have a huge amount of time to be out and eating on the plants that we've planted, because we're in the climate where we plant early. If I were still in Virginia, I would not think of putting anything in the ground until May. I've already got a whole bunch of stuff already planted, and that was at the end of February. So it's just a very different climate. So you have to think about what's conducive to your conditions. If you're going through a period of rain, you probably don't want to use any soap because it's just going to wash off. So you want to do some of those things when you know that you're going to have a bright sunny day. And it will mitigate the majority of the insects that way better too. Also, the location of your bug. Think like a bug. If you were a little bitty bug and you had to find something to eat and you had to find a place to hide, where would you go? Look at your garden. Where are the dark spaces that the sun doesn't hit? That's a great place for bugs. Under the leaves, around the base of the plant. Actually, if you think about how far out the leaves extend, I actually check that whole perimeter area. Because I found that once you have an infestation and you take care of it around the stem, the reason they were all around the stem of the plant is because there are a lot around it. So they're just congregating. So that's something that you have to look for in your soil. Monitoring tools, traps, flushing agents, hand lens, knives, collection containers, and field guides. I don't know exactly what they're doing with the knives. I've never carried one out in the garden.
Committing Harry Carey because you can't kill the bug.
Maybe. That's a rough way to go, though.
Yeah.
But you use the knife to get down into the soil.
The knife? The only time I carry anything like that is if I have to cut down bamboo. I've never really seen a use for a knife in the garden. But, you know, there's probably a gazillion people out there able to tell you that's the best thing to use. I don't know.
He's using that to cut sod.
Yeah. And he's hand cutting it too. That's just a big X-Acto knife. Traps. Traps are one thing that I really like to use. This is a trap right here. This is a stick that they put in the middle of a bunch of plants, and it's got sticky tape on it. You want to put it down far enough into the ground that the actual leaves are surrounding it, but not touching it, because it will stick. If he were to leave it up here, he wouldn't have any bugs other than the ones that just happen to fly by. What he's looking at is to get that thing down into the plants themselves. You put one out, you leave it out overnight, you check it the next day. You'll be able to see what kind of plants have been playing around in your garden. I set these traps out various and sundry different places. I have 8 raised beds. The 12-foot long ones, I put 6. That's going to give me a good indication of what's going up and down those long beds. Some of the smaller beds, I might put 5, might put 4. Depends on how many plants I've got in there. Squash, they're pretty far apart, so I'm only going to use 3 or 4. Those traps are going to tell you more information than anything that you could do while you're looking for other bugs in the daytime. Because the majority of the bugs that are going to be eating your plants are night eaters. They're nocturnal little critters. Field guide. This is a little heavy to carry around. They do make field guides that are smaller. You can tote around with you. I've never seen one that had just Texas bugs, though. In my opinion, this is the best book you can buy because it's going to give you everything that you can see in your garden. They talk about flushing agents. That's either your Dawn soap. In some instances, I'll just drag the hose, turn on the water, and give everything a good bath. Just water down all the plants. I'll take it, I'll get up underneath and pull the leaves up, and I'll get up all underneath it. And I mean, just blast them. It'll knock all those bugs off. Then you just rake a little bit on the surface, rake all those bugs off that you washed up, and put them in your compost. That's what I do. Traps in logical places. They like things like edges and walls, water and food sources, and they're always looking for shelter. Just like anybody, if you put a building in your backyard, the first place you're going to notice insects is in that building. I don't know why, but they seem to go to that fresh wood. They like it. So you want to trap in logical places. You're not going to stick it out in the middle of your yard unless you're trying to find out what insects are bothering your turf grass. So you want it up close and personal to the plants that you're most concerned about. But again, you can do an awful lot with just water. Date your traps. I number my traps. I have a little drawing, and I make sure that I have every section numbered, and I keep track of it that way. When I'm looking for insects, which is when my plants are first starting to flower, I really start looking at the insects because the flowering plant is going to draw more insects than a non-flowering plant. And replenish them often. If I go out and check, I'm going to tear that strip off. I'm going to write the date. I'm going to stick it on a piece of paper next to where I've listed everything that I've seen today. And I'm going to know from day to day, every 2 days, how many ever days you go out and check your garden, exactly what kind of bugs I'm finding. You'll see that it changes as seasons change. You'll have some bugs in the spring. You won't see them so much in the summer. You'll have some bugs in the summer that you won't see in the fall. So they can have various and sundry different living habits. They make a manufactured sticky pad. I found them expensive for what you use them for. I get the big wide, the widest masking tape I can get, and I back roll it, and I stick it on a piece of wood. And that's all I use. And they get stuck on that masking tape.
I used a lint roller.
A lint roller. I bet that worked good.
It does, and then you just tear it off.
Yeah. That's pretty ingenious. A lint roller. Don't forget that. That's ingenious.
Is the blue and yellow sticky traps for different insects?
Nope.
Or no, it doesn't matter?
Nope. Doesn't matter. Large areas, it's always a good idea. And I know you've been with Dennis Hale at least once. Has he talked to you about your landscape design yet? Okay, well, that's coming up. But determining what your landscape looks like from a scientific perspective. Where are my shade areas? Where are my sun areas? What areas do I have? And am I separating varieties of plants based on where I'm planting them? This may be nothing but lilies. Here, they're going to attract different bugs than if I have something like Coreopsis, marigolds in this one. That's going to attract a totally different group of bugs. So knowing the areas of your landscape that has the potential to be infested is what you're looking for in your design, because that's going to help you think about where you need to look for what kind of bugs. If you have big mature shrubs, those are about the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that you wouldn't really need to inspect religiously. Because once they're mature, they're pretty good with taking care of themselves. And insects don't really seem to bother them that much unless they get bagworms. And those just can get over anything. So it's always a good idea to have something to help you plan. All right, here are some beneficials. Your field guide, of course. The camera's wonderful. There is a part of Google that will allow you to take a picture or import a picture, and you press send or an arrow button, and it gives you what they think the bug is. When it first came out, I tested it several times, trying to see if I could get it to misidentify things. It wasn't that easy. They were pretty good. Plants, sometimes I think they don't even know what planet they're on when we're talking about plants. But bugs, that particular app works pretty good. So you can take a picture, send it through Google, and it'll give you an indication as to what Google thinks it is. And then it will actually give you information about how to eradicate the pest if it's in your yard. So that is a resource that you have. iNaturalist is a wonderful program. If you ever talk to Peter Hernandez, I think he's coming next week. Yep. He's big into iNaturalist, and it's a wonderful program where you can save things that you've seen. You can tell what part of the area it's from. It'll keep all of this information, and then you can look at other people's plots and see what kind of things they're dealing with or what kind of insects they're finding in their yards. So it's a good way to see what's going on in the community as far as pest control. And that's really important in an area such as Seguin, because we have more field around us than we do real estate. Well, it still is compared to other locations that I've seen here in Texas. Sprawling San Antonio, Austin's the same way.
Yeah, but 46 used to have those big fields and farms on them.
That's true.
Now they're going away. There's houses.
Yeah.
everywhere.
And that's why we'll eventually start eating bugs. Because, yeah, all of our land is going to development for people. So our available land sources for a lot of the things that we've taken for granted are slowly disappearing. Google Lens is the name of the app that goes through the Google link. And then you can use Apple ID for those of you who use an Apple phone. It also has an app that will identify plants, insects, right there for you. I've not had the greatest success with Apple ID. iNaturalist is pretty good. The Google is pretty good. But still the best is when you do it yourself. Because you know exactly what that bug looks like. You know exactly what the characteristics are. Now, these two bugs look fairly similar. So not all beetles are ladybugs, and not all ladybugs have spots. This is a cucumber beetle compared to a ladybug. Now, this one is a good guy. He's going to be in your garden and you're going to love him. He, on the other hand, he needs to go somewhere. And hopefully not into your garden. Assassin bugs versus a leaf-footed bug. Now, a leaf-footed bug is a pretty harmless little critter. But the assassin bugs, they're predators. They love ants. They love fire ants. So they're my friend.
Don't try to pick one up.
No, no.
They hurt. I tried to instigate a fight between an assassin bug and a jumping spider. It was on this gate with my 35 millimeter, and I've got my hand up and I'm trying to shoot it, and that little sucker turned around and nailed me on in my thumb. I thought about just go ahead and cut my thumb off.
Yeah. I can understand that.
I got a pocket knife.
A long time ago.
Now, the leaf-footed bugs are pretty harmless as adults, but when they're in that young adult stage, the nymph stage, They are voracious eaters. The adult bug doesn't really eat much at all. A little nectar every once in a while. But there are a lot of bugs in those particular categories that just don't eat when they're adults. Their lifespan is fairly short. Well, what kind of insects are on the plant? Anytime you see bugs, you're going to know that you're going to have to modify what you've been doing, because what you've been doing is good for the plants to grow, but you haven't done anything to mitigate your pests. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to reduce the number of pests that we have presently in the garden, plus we're taking into consideration the more of those adult pests we can get rid of, the fewer eggs we're going to see, hopefully. Site selection. Are these plants where they're going to be the best thriving plants in your yard? The first thing that bugs look for, any insect, is weakness in a plant. And if you have a plant that's dead or dying or has a huge infestation, what you thought an infestation today is a megafestation tomorrow. And it's not only got the original infestation, but it's added more. So make sure you're taking good care of your plants and you're putting them where they would benefit the most. Most of the superstars you see here in Texas love full sun. Some of them will go in partial shade. You have some of the trees that are undercarriage, trees that will grow in the shade. So you make sure that you have your plants planted in the part of your yard that is best suited for that plant. I know with my house, I have direct sun coming from the east. It comes into the solar panels. If I go on to the other side of my house, it's not until 6 o'clock at night that that side of my house even gets any sunlight. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time and energy trying to plant a bunch of plants over there, because unless I can find something, my hydrangeas are never going to grow there. They don't get enough sunlight. So it's always something in your yard that's always going to have to be a problem for you. Weeds. Exactly. Yeah, lots of them. Crop rotation is important. I know as a young person, I would go out into the garden and I would put the tomatoes exactly where the tomatoes had been the year before, because it worked really well. I got a lot of tomatoes off of those plants. So I'm going to put them right back there because it's perfect for tomatoes. Same with the beans, same with the potatoes. Unfortunately, after a while, planting the same crop over and over again is going to diminish that soil of so many nutrients, it's going to become useless. And you're going to completely have to augment your soil with lots of compost, peat moss, perlite, all kinds of different things that you could use. But you need to rotate your crops.
How often do you need to do that?
Every year. I don't think it's healthy for your plants to ever grow in the same place twice. Now, my rotation is a 3-year rotation. It takes me 3 years to get all my plants from where they started around the garden until where they started again, the 3rd year. So I move them out of the tomato row into the potato patch. I'm going to move my potatoes maybe to where I planted the tomatoes. I'm just going to move it around. And that's going to help me keep my soil more active for longer. Because augmenting your soil is rough. Because every time you till that earth over, you're potentially exposing it to pathogens. So there is a big thing now of digless gardens and no-till gardens. And that's so that you keep all the microbes, the nematodes, and all those important nutrients in the soil. Because every time you turn it over, you expose it to the air and the sunlight, and that's going to kill it. Soil preparation. Drainage is a big issue at my house, again, because I have about that much topsoil and then about 1,02,576 feet of rock. So I've had to go to raised beds completely. But if you're doing soil preparation, you need to make sure that you have everything in there already that you need for it to grow. Because once you've got it planted in there, it's too late. The only thing you can do is add fertilizers. Most of the time they're going to be in liquid form. So if you want to put lots and lots of nutrients, this is where you do it. There are a lot of different things you can use to fill up one of these beds without going out and spending, $1,000 on topsoil. The thing you need to think about is improving your drainage. Make sure that you have something in the bottom that's going to allow that water to drain through so that the soil on top doesn't constantly stay wet, because that is something that some of the raised beds will do. They will get over wet. Add nutrients. Loosening the soil at this point in my garden means I take a hand hoe and I kind of chip at the top. I take the weeds out, and that's pretty much all I do. I'm even to the point now when my tomatoes are done, I cut the bottom of the tomato plant off at the base and leave the roots in the ground. Because as they decompose, they're going to add natural compost into my bed. Yeah. Plant selection. Well, again, we're back to superstars are your first best bet. They've all been tested through Texas A&M. We know they grow here. Some of the other plants you may choose, again, the box stores don't care if they'll grow here or not. I bought a house in a brand new subdivision. I had 3 red elms. They don't grow in Texas. They grow in Michigan. I've been in that house for 4 years, and both of my trees are gone. And that's sad.
I wouldn't grow anything above the Mason-Dixon line down here.
Seriously. Seriously. So plant selection is important. And pick healthy plants. I know that there are a lot of people, and I've seen it myself, that will go to a box store and they'll be looking around the aisles and they'll pick out the plants that are half dead. And then they'll go up and oh, this is dead. Do you mind if I take it? And they'll be like, oh, give me 50 cents and you can have it. That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They take it home and they spend all of their time and energy trying to heal a sick plant. That takes a long time. So keeping them healthy when you plant them is important, but selecting a plant that's healthy is where it starts.
And if I could interject.
Absolutely.
She has a very good point for people that haven't in this class that bought a lot of plants or this is all new to you. When you go to a nursery example or a big box store, those plants are not grown here locally. They're grown someplace else, mass production. Don't feel bad about picking up a 2-gallon pot of a particular bush and trying to pull carefully or ask someone at the nursery to pull out the soil wall to determine that you can see some white, healthy roots. If there's no white roots at all and you don't even see any kind of a reddish looking root, I would say
no go. Yeah.
And the same thing, a lot of these plants, these shippers have contracts with these big box stores to ship X amount of bushes and so forth, whatnot. But be on the safe side. You need to also look underneath the leaves and see if there's any kind of infestations at all to Beth's point. Okay? I mean, it's your money, as she said, your time trying to, please pray, Lord, my plant needs help,
When we first were taking Master Gardener in 2023, there were a bunch of pots out here next to the shed, and one of the pots had a totally destroyed pothos plant. The one that looks like ivy, goes everywhere. It was dead. Well, I knew somebody who picked it up and said, oh, this isn't dead. And I'm like, okay. It took her 3 years of nursing that plant to get leaves on it. 3 years. I could have gone to Home Depot and bought her one for $2.
You know, and then what Beth is talking about is so important because, like, when Dennis Hell was here and he asked you all to do a landscape design and everything, and you're thinking, okay, and Dennis Hell said, now, when you plant that bush there, imagine when you read the tag, it's going to be 5 foot tall and 5 foot wide, and you're expecting it to get there, but if you keep trying to nurse a plant, and it's not growing, now you're 2 years behind, and now you got this hole, and now you got to start all over, and you've wasted all that time on that plant.
My rule of thumb is if I first see the signs of disease, mostly if it's boring, worms, anything like that, that plant's done. I don't care how many blooms it's got. I don't care how much fruit's on it. It's gone. It gets cut down at the base. I don't eat the fruit. It goes in the composter. That's important. Gardens are expensive. Think about how much money you put into it. I mean, I can remember when you could get a pack of seeds for $0.10. Now you're lucky to find a little pack of tomato seeds that might have 6 tiny little seeds in a little foil package for $3 and $4. This isn't real. So these are expensive things. This is an expensive pastime. Hobbyers, man, that's a lot of work. So we want to make sure that we invest the time that we need to invest in order to make the things that we've done worthwhile. Because it's hard work. I know that I have many a time been at the Big Red Barn when they have work days on Friday, and those people are working. They're sweating. They're dirty.
We don't sweat, we perspire.
You perspire. That's it. They glisten. They glisten. So it's hard work. Getting down on your knees is hard work. So if you're going to put the effort and the money into this, it's only fair that you have the tools you need to make sure that it stays nice. And hopefully this is what Master Gardener Experience will help you with. All right, now I've got a fussy page. All right, watering. There's a lot to be said about irrigation. Irrigation is important. Now it all depends. How much do you want to put into an irrigation system? You can do one for about $45 with a hose and a nice sprinkler head. You drag it all around wherever your plants are and you give them a bunch of water. Some of us got houses with watering systems that were already installed underground. Unfortunately for the system though, I took all the spigots off and attached lines to go into my garden. So every time my sprinklers go off, it's watering my garden. Watering is going to help improve your productivity. It's going to help you really get a good root structure at the beginning of its growing season. Drip irrigation, though, is the best. And I say this for monetary reasons only. There are a lot of ways you can water plants, and they're all equally good. Drip irrigation, however, can take a gallon and spread it across several plants and give them a nice watering. In that same amount of time, if I were using a hose, I could use up to 150 gallons in a 30-minute period. Now, the price of water here in Guadalupe County doesn't want me to use 100 and some gallons of water. Because here, they reciprocate your sewage costs with how much water you use. They don't care that you dumped it on the ground. They count it as it went down the drain. So water can be very expensive. So you mitigate that by putting in a system that's going to help you put in drip lines. This looks like it was a drip line from many, many years ago and needs to be replaced. Soil moisture is important, and that's something that you need to keep track of. A lot of people like to stick their fingers in it, and if it's wet or they pull out anything that's damp, they know they have enough water. I've never been able to accurately judge whether our plant needed water by sticking my finger in it. I have one of the probes that you stick in. It'll go 4 to 6 inches down into your soil, and it'll tell you exactly how much moisture you have in it. And that is so much easier, because if it rings that it's dry, it's not necessarily dry on the top. It's dry down where the roots are. So you really need to give it a good drink of water. But those meters really, really do help. The only thing you have to worry about, though, is if you use a meter and you go from one variety of vegetable to another variety, you want to make sure you have those Clorox wipes, and you want to wipe down the tongs of that tool before you go into another bed. You don't want to transfer a possible disease from this bed into this one. You don't want to take the potential of these pests taking over this garden part into this one. So you always clean your tools. They're going to nag at you about cleaning clippers too. Anything you use in your garden to cut, trim, or otherwise change the appearance needs to be cleaned. One thing that I can tell you happened to me, I have several tents in my house that I grow hydroponically, and somebody had given me a huge basket of strawberry plants. It was cold outside. All my garage was full of the plants that I brought in. I didn't have any place to put it, so I just unthinkingly opened the tent and put it on the floor. 3 days later, my tent was covered with spider mites. Spider mites. Spider mites. They all had to go bye-bye. Because I'm not in a situation where I can hose it off in my house. I would outside, just hose them off. But all those plants had to go to the wayside because of spider mites. And that was purely me transferring it into my house. So I learned a hard lesson. I don't bring soil into my house. If it has soil in it, that's how it grows. It doesn't come in my house. It stays outside or in the garage. I have to keep that kind of barrier of protection around me. Fertilizers. Fertilizers are important. No matter what soil you use, it's going to tell you that it has nutrients and it's great for beginning plants or it's great for potting plants. That's all good. But I have never gotten a package of any kind of prepackaged fertilizer other than some chemical liquids that I have found to be really successful. What people tell me around here, and I've experienced it myself, Gonzalez, is that the place that has a mushroom farm? Yeah. I've gone out there and I've gotten some of that compost. After I used that compost, I had some zucchini plants that, honest to goodness, were this big around. I mean, it was just incredible. Now, I put too much nitrogen in the bed. I had beautiful plants, not one flower. Because it was nitrogen dependent at that point, and it was like, I'm just sucking nitrogen. I could care less if I send out a flower. I don't even care if I have any fruit, because I'm sucking nitrogen. So you can't over-fertilize your garden.
Where did you get that from?
It's in Gonzalez at a mushroom plant. Kitchen Pride, yep. If you have a trailer, they will, for a small fee, it's under $100, they will load your trailer. They will not put it in the back of your pickup truck unless you really want them to. They're going to try and put 4 loads, 4 square yards on your truck. I have a big Tundra, 6-foot bed. I got half of the scoop in my truck. So, you know, if you want to go out there, if you can go out there with a container and shovel it into the container all you want, it's free. It's a huge pile, and it's wonderful. There's also a place in Buda. That place is also a mushroom farm. However, they use the wheat substrates, and they come in blocks. That's what they use to grow mushrooms on. And after they've taken they only use them one time. So after they've taken the first harvest off of the mushroom blocks, they toss them into a box, and it's first come, first serve. They have huge boxes out there full of these bags full of wheat material that these mushrooms are going to make. They're another Kitchen Pride.
Yeah, and if you're interested, excuse me,
Uh-huh.
if you're interested going out to Gonzales, on the east side of Gonzales, what, 3 miles out or something like that, call them before. The lady, the receptionist is Sandra, very nice lady, because they do have certain hours of operation, okay, because it is a working processing plant. But then also ask her, if you got like a small trailer, ask her on the mushroom compost that you're welcome to, ask them if it's been rained on. Because when compost is wet, it really puts a lot of extra weight on those smaller trailers and those single axle. So you may not be able to pick up as much cubic yard-wise as what you thought you would.
Right.
Okay?
Interesting thing about the compost that you get from there, you really need to put it out in a place and just kind of let the sun kind of do its thing with it. It'll take away the odor, because when you first get it, it smells like compost. After a few weeks in the sun, usually I'd let it sit out there for maybe 2 weeks to a month, that smell will dissipate. I have never had my neighbors complain. I make sure that it's in the center of my property, so they have to have a really strong nose to smell it that far from their house. But that stuff that you get that's grain, it's really cool, because you can take it home, you can put it in a dark spot, and you can have another full growth of mushrooms. So if you like lion's mane, you like trumpet mushrooms, those are the main things that they grow there. You can have, mushrooms for a couple of months just by them regrowing on those blocks. When they stop producing, I just take them out of the plastic, I put them in a bucket, and I take a hoe to it and break it up, and then I chuck it in the raised beds.
That's the one in Buda.
That's the one in Buda. Now, the one good thing about using that is that after you have a good rain and it's been out there a couple of months, you'll have mushrooms grow. And it's really cool, because you'll go out there to be picking tomatoes and like pull the tomato apart. Oh man, there's a mushroom. You grab that thing and then you have it for dinner. I'm sorry, this keeps timing out. I don't know why. So, nutrients, they come in all shapes and sizes. There are nutrients that I use in hydroponic units that I would not use with my outdoor plants. There are fertilizers that I use outside that I wouldn't use inside. Mainly it's for odor issues. Fish emulsion, don't ever do that inside. No, never. Ooh, you'll never get rid of that fish smell. My dogs enjoyed it. I did not.
So what kind of fertilizer do you put on your hydroponics?
I use a variety the thing with hydroponics is you really have to make a choice whether you're going to go the liquid route or the mix your own chemical route. I always do the mix my own chemicals because I use so much of it.
Yeah.
Getting one of those little 16-ounce bottles, I wouldn't even be able to change out all the tanks I have. So I get the dry chemicals because it just goes further. There are lots of different brands out there. If you look at a store, the name is Bright Ideas. They have a hydroponic part in their store. And you can buy all kinds of fertilizer chemicals in there. They use a lot of Fox Farm there. If you've heard of the Fox Farm brand, that's a pretty popular brand. I use a brand name called Nexus. It's not that it's better, it's just that it works and it's fairly inexpensive, so I just keep using it. If they jack the price up, I'll go to something else. Because right now it's fairly inexpensive, but I've turned over different things as the prices change. Yeah. Because you have that flexibility. Everything grows so fast in your hydroponics, it's not going to be an issue to change out fertilizer in another bucket. So you want to remove thick vegetation. That's the first thing. That will help you reduce your weeds. Now let's talk about sanitation. Pruning is important. How many of you prune your tomatoes? We should all be pruning our tomatoes. They love a haircut. It'll bush them out, and it'll get the fruit bigger. They love a haircut. So prune your tomatoes.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Cut. How do you do it?
I'm topping them.
Take that tomato plant, how would you do it?
If this was 3 times the size it is right now, I would look at what the main stem's coming up through it right here. And this is part of the main stem here. I would take away this leaf, and this leaf. And as it grows, eventually all I'm going to have to do is just cut off the top. And that'll promote it to grow more and produce more.
Cut off the top.
The top.
Of the main stem.
Yeah, of the main plant. Now, granted, your plant at that point is going to be pretty tall. These I wouldn't start pruning until they were at least in the blooming stage.
Well, there's one blooming already. Right there.
Yeah.
Put your hand on it.
Yeah, they're a little bit too small. They don't really, if I were looking at this, can anybody see what needs to be taken off?
Yep, that one.
This one.
That one right there.
I would take that off before I even planted it. And I want to clip it right past the node because you can see, if you look closely, there's another leaf trying to grow in that joint right there. And right past that is where you want to cut it off.
Is that what they call the sucker leaf? Or
Yeah.
is it- Okay,
But you want to cut it off right above that.
okay.
Yep. If you have large areas in your yard that are covered with brush, dying brush, you have piles of leaves, compost them, get them in a composter so they'll start breaking down. Don't just leave piles of leaves in your yard because it's going to attract a lot of bugs you don't necessarily want to have. All right, spacing. And this is what Tim was talking about a few minutes ago. We get these tiny little plants, and they're so cute. We pick out a place to plant them, and if we put them as far apart as they needed to be, it'd be like, oh, it looks like I didn't plant any plants. I mean, I've got all this empty space here, but you really need to go forward with it. If it says it needs to be 6 inches apart, do it 8. Make sure you look at those packages and see what the spacing is, because that's important. You don't want one plant overshadowing another. And you don't want the plants so close together that if one of them happens to get an infestation of a bug, you're far enough away that maybe if you get it quickly, the rest of your plants will be okay. So spacing is important, not only for the height. Not only talk about how tall it gets, but you really need to think about how wide it's going to be. And remember that the length of the leaves, how far they outstretch from the trunk of the plant or the stem of the plant is your drip line. And you have roots all the way to that drip line. Companion planting. Does anybody companion plant? Yay! This is one thing that the grow team is really trying to focus on this year, is making sure we have lots of companion plants available for the vegetables that we're providing. So companion plants are really, really important. The 3 sisters, you know what that is?
Corn, squash, beans.
And beans, yes. And they do grow very well together. My grandmother on my mother's mother was half Miami Indian. She was raised on a reservation. My grandmother, until she died, still planted like this. Everything she planted was mound planting. She didn't have rows of anything. It would be this mound, move a few feet over, this mound, a few feet over, another mound, no rows, all companion planting. My grandmother had a garden that was probably about a quarter of the size of this room. I don't think I ever knew her to buy vegetables. She canned everything. And her cellar was always full. So she was very successful at what she did with her companion planting. That's going to the extreme. but it certainly is a wonderful way to plant.
Do we get a class on how to can, since, master gardeners?
I know that
Last year, we did have some canning classes. They were a blast. We made jams. Oh, it was good. We even
We'll do it again after the Master Garden class.
as Master Garden class. And it's really cool because April did a lot of research before we started the canning, and she came up with a recipe for sugar-free jams. And man, if you like a tart jam, oh my God, it's so good. So yes, I hope that we do that again this year.
I do a lot of canning, and I was telling this lady right here, I was like, yeah, what you say you can, people will come out of the woodwork and
Yeah.
give you jars. So,
Now, we did the hot water canning with just the container. We never had a class with the big machine that you crank down, and yeah, I've done that with adult supervision. But, I hope they do that class because I really need to know how to do that.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out how to do a pressure canning class.
Yeah.
But we will do a water-bound canning class after the Master Garden class. We'll put it out. It was, I think, $35.
Yeah.
But you get to go home with a jar of jam.
Yeah.
It's hands-on.
Oh, yeah. But it was a lot of fun, and the pressure canning is what I'm interested in learning now.
It's in the works.
Because I'm getting enough produce at this point that I'm freezing a lot, but I'm starting to get a little frustrated with my freezer space, so I've got to convert to canning some things. So, yep.
In the works.
That's wonderful. All right, what do we have to do in order to control some of these pests? Well, we're going to use our labor, mostly. We have a few products, again, if you're staying organic, that work pretty effectively. But again, making sure you have healthy plants, making sure you're putting them in the right place as far as their need for sun or shade. You're watering them regularly. You're fertilizing regularly, because after a while, that dirt around that plant is going to be totally exhausted of all the nutrients. So you got to add them back. And you got to add them back on a regular basis. And it's not one of those things you can do just once a year. You have to put yourself on a schedule. I try to water all of my plants no less than every other day. That's with the monitor. And I go behind me after that and start looking for pests. Because some of it will come off with the watering process. The ones that don't, I really need to look at. Yes?
how often do you fertilize that?
I fertilize at least once a month. Now, once on the grow team, once I have a true leaf, I'm using a dilute fertilizer, and it just gives them a little boost in nitrogen. Yeah, and it's just, you think of like a baby bath for your little baby plants. Checking them physically, I can't express to you enough how important that is. Because you really need to get up close and personal. After you do it for a couple of years, you're going to start anticipating when these things are going to start happening around your yard. And you'll be able to mitigate it even better so you can stop it before it even happens. That's possible. Mulch. There is a tremendous importance that mulch adds to your garden. A lot of people say, what, you mulch your vegetable garden? Absolutely. Now here in Seguin, behind the animal shelter, there is a huge fenced-in area that has got free mulch. It's not the greatest mulch in the world. It's all, pretty much trees that the companies around have been cutting down for power lines. So, it's not really hardwood mulch, but it's good mulch. You get it for free. I get it by the truckload. I put probably 2 to 3 inches of mulch on top of my beds as soon as I planted my plants. And then I water it really good. That mulch is going to stay wet and is going to give my plants moisture for a lot longer than if I didn't have it there. So if I'm going to go out of town and I'm not going to be able to look at my garden for 2 or 3 days, I will add a little extra mulch around the base of the plants. I'll water them to death, and then I'll not worry about them until I come back. I've never gone more than 2 or 3 days. I hate to think what would happen after a week. I'm not willing to try that yet. We shall see.
Is your drip line underneath your mulch?
Yes. Yep. And my drip line goes right up next to the plant itself. So I'm watering at the base of the plant. Yes?
For that mulch, do you have to be a Guadalupe County resident?
I've never had anybody check stickers. No. I mean, they don't.
Do you have to load it yourself, or do they load it?
You can have them loaded. You'd have to call them in advance. I do have a guy that's there sometimes who can load it, so you kind of have to coordinate with them. I found it easier for me to just do it in those big paper lawn bags. I fill those up, and it's just easy to take them around and just kind of turn them upside down and dump them out. I don't have to do a lot of shoveling.
Where's it located?
It's behind the animal shelter. Yeah.
Fred Bird Drive.
Okay, I just pulled it up, thank you.
But again, if you want them to load it, I would get in touch with them and find out what days they are actually going to do it. I have not heard that they stopped. So I'm assuming that they still will load if you're going on the day that they're able to do that. Well, not only is mulch going to help keep all your water from evaporating, it is also great for preventing splashing diseases. Now, splashing diseases are things that happen if you're out in the garden and you're just willy-nilly watering, and all of a sudden you go from shower to jet. That's going to disturb your soil enough that you could possibly have insects in that area that are just going to explode in all directions. So be careful with the amount of power that you put behind the water. Unless you're intentionally washing bugs off of the underside or eggs, be gentle with it. You can give them a lot of water. And if they do have those eggs underneath or bugs underneath, you can blast those leaves. But try to be gentle, especially when they're young, because you can't give them too much water and you can knock them over. You can break the stems. You can do all kinds of stuff with water that's too forceful. It also improves the soil because that bark is going to start degrading and it's going to continue adding nutrients into your soil. So mulch is your friend. There is this trend to use this reflective mulch. It's really kind of some strange stuff. I guess it's the same idea that they're going to put reflective material in the garden itself to somehow scare the bugs away in some instances, but it's going to raise the temperature in that particular area. Supposedly that helps with pest control, if you can raise the ambient temperature around those plants. I've never tried it, so I don't know if it works or not.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Yeah.
It's hot.
Yeah.
Are we gonna kill them all?
Well, I was thinking that it would be like, one of those solar dishes and we'd be sending
Yeah,
light rays out to the moon.
we're toasting ourselves.
Toasting ourselves. But that is something that people are using these days.
Not recommended for redheads, right?
No. Hand picking and vacuuming. I told you to carry around a little hand vac. They actually make hand vacs that are specifically designed to catch bugs. My Black & Decker works fine. Any of those little shop vacs will work. You're going to take your shop vac around and basically you're just going to suck up all the bugs that you see. If you want to do a bug collection, this is a really good way to do one. Also, vacuuming and hand picking. This woman isn't hand picking so much as she's hand smacking. She's just going to smack the bug and it's going to fall in the jar. So those are two more ways of picking out what is infesting or bothering your garden. And hopefully when you look at the pests, you're going to be pleasantly surprised to see how many are actually dangerous and how many are good. And I think you'll be surprised as to how many good bugs you actually find in your garden.
So do you put the good ones back?
They're,
That's what I'm thinking. We'll get all the good ones. and
unfortunately,
Catch the bad.
when you use the sticky traps, they're done.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah,
Or you can eat that?
yeah.
Some people are more like a soap.
High pressure wash. Now, I won't tell myself on this one. I took the class and they were like, high pressure wash really does take care if you're really infested with a lot of eggs. So I went out and I had a Coreopsis that was just covered with all these weird looking little balls. I'm like, well, we'll try it. So I got out the power washer, cranked it up, and I blew that plant 30 feet into the yard. It just went. That's all I can say. Now, it says it works well with flying insects. If you ever decide to chase flying insects with your power washer, please invite me. I want to see it. Use row covers. I have found this to be a pretty effective method when your plants are young. I've found that every time you open your covers, you're going to get bugs to come in. The covers are really good if your fruit is ripening because the birds can't get at it. So it's really a good thermal insulation when the plants are young. So it will raise the soil temperature enough to give them a really good head start. Most of the time, because of the way I've designed the beds, by the time my plants are mature, I couldn't put a cover over them. So I just use them really early. I know people who use them all throughout the growing season, and they love it. And they say that it does reduce the amount of pests that you have inside that enclosure.
But then don't you have to have something to pollinate the plant?
Yes,
You know, a pollinator.
yes,
That's the conundrum.
that is the conundrum. It is an issue. However, I don't, other than tomatoes and a couple of other varieties of things, most of what I grow is from seed. So when that starts to come out of the ground and you have, you start getting seed leaves, is when I start covering things up. Because there are more things that are going to come in and try and eat my young tender plants than the ones that I have when they're full grown. At least a full grown plant has enough keratin developed around the outside of the stem that the bugs that can decimate small plants don't do anything to the adult plants. And again, it's what works best for you. I've known people who used shade cloth as covers to keep some of the bugs away. Plant collars. Now these are interesting. There are all kinds of things that you can use. You can see here, this is a tube probably from paper towel. This is a little can. This one here, it looks like it just has some tape wrapped around the bottom of it. This is like the squirrel test. You know how people are always trying to come up with contraptions that go around the bottom of your feeders so the squirrels don't climb up in it, eat all the grain in it? That's basically what you're doing here. You're trying to create a trap at the bottom so that they can't get up into your plant. So it's going to crawl up here, hopefully not get any further, because it's not sensing anything that it can eat. So it's probably going to go away. Now, I saw a guy one time, he had several tomato plants, and we had talked about him putting some collars around the bottom of his plants. And I went over to see him a couple weeks later, and he had gotten the tubes out of gift wrap, these, and he had stuffed the plants through these tubes, and almost all the leaves were gone, because as he put the tube on it, he just stripped it. And so I'm sitting there looking at him, and I'm like, that's different. And he's like, well, I don't understand what happened. All the leaves fell off. You think it's got an infestation? I said, yeah, you. You really did a number on your plant. You couldn't have stripped it more efficiently than if you had tried to strip it that way. But it stripped every leaf. These you're going to put around your plant when it's a little baby. and it's going to grow inside of that. So he was waiting until his plants were pretty big, and it was like, oh, I got to put this thing on a wham. And that's all she wrote.
See, I thought those were for, so you don't hit them with a weed eater.
Yeah.
No, they're just for protection.
I've used the coffee cans. The only thing I use them for is my tomatoes mainly, but it's getting harder and harder to find metal coffee cans. But they work really good. They just have to be in about that deep for cutworms. But it makes watering easy, man. You just fill that can up with water, it goes right down. Water each of your tomatoes and go back, and if it's the first can's empty, fill it up.
Fill it up. There you go.
It works great.
These are really good things to do, though, because it really does help mitigate a lot of the crawling insects that will come up and eventually create all the problems under your leaves. But do it early. Don't wait until it's grown. Yes?
Will those, that previous slide, will those keep borer beetles from
Yes.
eating my squash?
If you use the aluminum cans, yes. They will go straight through the paper. They will eat it, actually,
Okay.
on the way to your plant. But if you use a metal can,
Appetizer.
it will work.
Even just a regular vegetable, 15.
Soup cans, a lot of people like to use the cat food cans because they're wider and flat. Any of those work.
Yay.
Yay, because they bore at the very base of your plant
Yes.
and get down into your root system. So if you can keep them away from that area, you should be okay. Excuse me. Trapping, and we've talked about trapping. Again, there are all kind of products out there. I'm one of these people that I like to see if I can invent something. So putting those traps out there, and again, you want to make sure you put it in the daytime so that you can collect your bugs over the night, okay? Because you want to look at it the next day. And it's important that it spends some time in the dark. Trap cropping. Well, this is where you plant crops that you hope will attract all of the bugs out of the crops that you don't want to be messed with. Trap cropping is popular in North Carolina. They have entire fields that they plant plants in to keep things from boring into their sweet potatoes. North Carolina is the #1 provider of sweet potatoes in the entire world. So that's a big deal to them. That's a lot of their economy. So trap cropping is something that they do, but we're talking about places that have 300 or 400 acres. It's nothing but sweet potatoes. And they have a border around the entire field of those waste pans. Biological control, this is where you may start thinking about chemicals. When you've just come to your wit's end, you've tried washing them, you've tried collaring them, you've tried this, you've tried that, and still nothing happens. I've used soap solution that's still coming back. Then I would go to things like neem oil. If you want to do something a little more severe, you're not worried about the organic nature, you can go into something like 7. Dust it, it'll take everything. But remember, when you're using those chemicals like 7, you're not only killing all the bad bugs, you're killing all the good bugs. And that could potentially kill all the bird life in your yard as well, because they're going to consume all the bugs you just killed with that pesticide. Okay. Well, that's it for IPM. You think you got it under control? The one thing I can tell you from my own experience in coming to a brand new state with brand new stuff is just be patient. Be patient. This does not clear itself up in a day. You can't completely transform your landscape in a year. It's something that you progress over time. But hopefully, by the time you're finished with this class, you'll have all the tools you need to make sure all of those plants are joyously bountiful in your yards. Thank you, folks. Yes.
One last question. based upon what you know and you've shared with the class, what is the best free, informative, easy to work with app to identify insects and if they're negative or bad, etc.?
I would either choose iNaturalist, that would be my number one choice,
Okay,
and then I would use the Google app.
and the Google. Okay, folks? Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome, thank you.